Part 32. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 312. Xing'an Temple is located in the suburbs of the capital. It is one of the largest temples in the capital. There are many gods and Buddhas enshrined in the temple. There are constant incense all year round. People go to the temple to pray for blessings and fortune, ask about illness and eliminate disasters. I don't know when it started, but there was a rumor among the people that Xing'an Temple is very effective in praying for marriage. If a woman sincerely offers incense, she will definitely find a good husband within a year. For this reason, most of the pilgrims who come to Xing'an Temple are unmarried young women. Even princesses of the royal family and daughters of powerful families in Beijing will come here to ask for divination and marriage. The first day of the first lunar month every year is the temple fair day of Xing'an Temple, and it is also the day with the most pilgrims. If you come late, you will have to wait in a long line for an hour. At this moment, the neat team in front of the temple gate suddenly dispersed, and everyone gathered in a circle, pointing at the figures inside. Several young men of obvious status fell to the ground, with more than 10 men who looked like guards standing in front of them. Opposite them was a woman. The woman did not carry any weapons, but she made the more than 10 men on the opposite side feel like they were facing a great enemy. Just now, everyone saw clearly that when these young men were pulling and tugging at a woman who came out of the temple, this female knight saw injustice and kicked them to the ground with a few kicks, which led to the current stalemate. A young man got up from the ground, not bothering to shake off the dust on his body, pointed at the tall woman, kicked the guard in front of him, and said angrily, "What are you still standing there for? Take them down." This is a peaceful place in Buddhism. They are so bold, aren't they afraid of the punishment from the Buddha? Shh, keep your voice down, we can't afford to offend these people. While everyone was talking in a low voice, the guards had already approached. Tang Yaoyao looked back at Fang Xiaoyu and the strange woman and said, "You stand behind." The young man saw the guards drawing their weapons and approaching slowly, and immediately said, "Put away your weapons. If you hurt the beauty, I will only hold you accountable." It was him who asked to draw the sword, and it was also him who asked to put away the weapons. The guards cursed in their hearts, but still honestly sheathed their weapons. A guard rushed over quickly and flew back at an even faster speed. After Tang Ning kicked the guard away, he stood in front of Tang Yaoyao and Fang Xiaoyu. Tang Yaoyao crossed her arms, walked in front of him, and whispered, "Can you do it?" In a 1-on-10 fight, Tang Ning would naturally be defeated, but if they really let go, he would not be afraid of 10 more Tang Nings. The poison technique taught by the old beggar can do more than just make Xiaoju have diarrhea. He glanced at Tang Yaoyao and said, "Stand behind." "Stop it," before the guards could move, a voice suddenly came from behind. The young man walked forward, looked at Tang Ning, and asked, "Does Lord Tang know this girl?" Tang Ning frowned and looked at him, and asked, "Who are you?" The young man bowed and said, "My father is Marquis Yanping." Tang Ning shook his head, "I don't know him." The young man's face showed embarrassment, and he said, "Last time at the banquet of His Royal Highness Prince Kong, I met Lord Tang once." He glanced at Tang Yaoyao, then looked at Tang Ning, and said, "It's a misunderstanding. Since she is Lord Tang's friend, let's just forget about it. We have something else to do, so we'll leave first." Several people walked out of the crowd in disgrace. Tang Yaoyao looked at Tang Ning and asked, "Your friend?" "Not familiar." Tang Ning shook his head. He did know a lot of people at the banquet of Prince Kong, but he didn't know these people. It seems that they are not important people. The plain-clothed woman behind Tang Yaoyao looked at her, bowed, and said, "Thank you, young lady, for saving us." Tang Yaoyao waved her hand and said, "Those guys may not have left yet. Why don't you wait here for a while and go back with us?" The team returned to normal. Tang Ning wanted to wait for them outside, but Tang Yaoyao insisted on dragging him to line up together. As a married man, he still wanted to find a marriage partner. However, considering Tang Yejing's temperament, in case she caused any trouble after he left, Tang Ning still stood in front of him. The people around were still discussing what had just happened. The one just now seemed to be the youngest son of Marquis Yanping. The youngest sons of Marquis Chang Xing and Earl Yang Chuan are also here. These powerful families are really lawless. In the Holy Land of Buddhism, they flirt with common women in public. Do they still have the law in their eyes? Hey, you don't know, now the court respects King Kong, and their families all support King Kong, so why should they care about the law? Tang Ning was in the queue, and naturally heard these mixed voices. These days, as King Kang's status in the court has risen, the powerful officials of King Kang's faction have finally raised their heads and are less scrupulous about doing things. Even if something really happens, the officials in the court will give King Kong a face and not make too much of a fuss. On the other hand, those who support Prince Duan and the Tang family are all keeping their tails between their legs. Once they are caught, people will come one after another to beat the fallen dog. In this world, whoever succeeds will be the most arrogant. In essence, there is not much difference between Prince Duan and Prince Kong. Somewhere outside the temple, a young man exhaled and said angrily, "After suffering such a big loss, are you just going to let it go?" The young man who spoke just now waved his hand and said, "What else can we do? His Royal Highness Kong thinks highly of the Tang man. It's okay to offend him. If you make His Royal Highness Kong unhappy, you will suffer when you go home." The young man sighed and said, "What a pity. The young lady is very pretty. You can't find this type in the brothel." The young man smiled and looked at the people queuing not far away, saying, "Don't you just like pure girls? There are so many here. Why hang yourself on a tree? You sound like you don't like them. You're tired of playing with the girls in the brothel. Don't you want to change your taste? It's time, go draw a lot first." There were many people queuing in front of him. After finally getting his turn, Tang Yaoyao quickly surrounded him and went in. I don't know why Tang Yejing is so interested in drawing lots. When I stepped into the hall, it immediately became much quieter. The air was filled with the smell of incense. A young monk stood in front and asked with a smile, "Excuse me, are you asking about your future or marriage?" Tang Yaoyao replied before Tang Ning, "I'm asking for marriage." The young monk pointed to the left and said, "Please come here to ask for marriage." Several people walked to a lottery tube. An old monk looked at him and said, "Please draw a lot from the tube." Tang Ning didn't need to ask for marriage, so he made way for Tang Yaoyao and said, "You come." Tang Yaoyao waved his hand and said, "You draw one first." Tang Ning didn't care at all, so he drew one and looked up. A perfect couple? A perfect couple like gods and goddesses. What more could a husband ask for? He looked at the number on the lot, looked at the old monk, and asked, "What does this lot mean?" The old monk was stunned, then put his hands together and said, "The donor is really blessed. This lot is the king of lots. Those who draw this lot will be a perfect couple like gods and goddesses, and live together for 100 years without having to look for a good match." Tang Ning is now living a happy life and having a happy marriage. This lot is quite accurate for him. He took out a silver ingot from his arms and put it in the merit box beside him. "I want to draw too." Fang Xiaoyu ran forward with some anticipation, drew a stick from the stick tube, and read, "The orioles are singing on the island of the river, the beautiful lady is the ideal match for the gentleman." Brother Tang Ning, what does this stick mean? I didn't expect that the young donor is also a person with great fortune. The old monk showed a look of surprise on his face, but soon recovered and said, "This is the first stick, which is a very auspicious stick. The spring tree is home to the birds, which is just right for pursuit. The man and the woman will get married, and the matchmaker will help them. If you ask about fate, it is a rare good match. If you ask about marriage, you will live together until old age. Tang Yao Yao couldn't wait to draw a stick, looked at it, and asked, it is like a phoenix leaving Qinlu, and clouds gathering Wushan. The old monk looked at her and said, the phoenix has left Qinlu, the lover has left, the clouds of Wushan have also gathered, the girl's beloved is about to go far away, and the matter of marriage still needs to wait and see. What do you mean? Tang Yao Yao looked at him and asked, what is this lot? The old monk put his hands together and said, this is a bad lot. Tang Yao Yao frowned and said, I'll draw another one. The old monk shook his head and said, female donor, you don't know, the first lot is the standard for asking for lots, and it's meaningless to draw again. When she came out of the temple, Tang Yao Yao was not in a good mood. If she put herself in Tang Ning's shoes, she might not be very happy either. There are only 1 in 10 bad lots in the lot tube, and she drew a bad lot at once. Her fortune is beyond ordinary people. Looking at her dejected look, Tang Ning patted her shoulder and comforted her, don't believe everything the old monk said. If he really understood marriage, he wouldn't be a monk in the temple. Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 313. Relationships are something you have to work hard and fight for. A broken sign can mean nothing. It's all money fraud. In the future, we will build a temple, invite a few monks, and write all the signs in the sign tube. The signature must be more than the money they charge for incense. This is actually a very profitable business. Tang Ning has even thought of ways to make money. What everyone wants is a good sign, a happy mood, and naturally more money for incense. She can also sell some small items that have been blessed by eminent monks. Yes, the investment is small and the return is high, which is more cost-effective than opening any store. Tang Ning was comforting Tang Yao Yao like this, but when she turned around, she saw several monks looking at them with somewhat unsightly expressions. Let's go, let's talk about it when we get back. He decided to comfort Tang Yao Yao on the way back. If he got into a fight with the monk in the temple later, he didn't know if Tang Yao Yao could withstand the Arhat formation or the Vajra demon subduing formation alone. As soon as a few people walked out of the temple gate, they saw a group of people walking in front of them. Chen Yuxian looked at him and said in surprise, Ning why are you here? Tang Ning said, there is no one at home, so Xiao Yuiao and I will go out for a walk. Mother-in-law took Xiao Ru Xiaoi and the others to 2 temples. Now that they had met, Tang Ning waited for them to finish before going back together. When he walked into the temple gate again, Chen Yuxian looked at Tang Yao Yao and said, I heard that seeking marriage here is particularly effective. Yao Yao, you should ask for a fortune teller here. Tang Ning rubbed the center of her eyebrows. Fairy Tang was upset when she asked for the lottery, but her mother-in-law's words made all his talk just now in vain. After they finished worshipping the Bodhisattva and asking for their fortunes, Tang Ning was taken to a wing in the backyard by a young monk. There were fast meals provided for pilgrims and a temporary resting place. It is said that it is provided for pilgrims, but in fact only a small number of people can enjoy this preferential treatment, and this small number of people do not care about the vegetarian meals in the temple. Therefore, Tang Ning was the only one in the Zen room. He was not picky about food and had been through hard times for quite some time. The green vegetable and white porridge tasted quite familiar. Besides, he had eaten a small bowl of Tang Yao Jing's boiled dumplings for most of the day, and he was a little hungry at the moment. No matter how bad the vegetarian meal was, could it be as bad as Tang Yao Jing's dumplings? Tang Ning was in the Zen room, eating green vegetables and white porridge with gusto. Outside Xing'an Temple, an extremely luxurious carriage slowly stopped. 2 figures got off the carriage. The older woman looked at the dazed girl next to her and said, it's hard to get out of the palace for once. Be happy. Don't worry about things you haven't decided yet. She pointed to the temple next to her and said, I heard that asking for fortune telling in this temple is very effective. I'll take you to see it and ask about good or bad luck. She held the girl's hand and walked into the temple. Not long after, a monk came out to welcome them and respectfully invited them to a quiet room. The woman held the girl's hand and comforted her. I have asked my father, but the court has not started discussing this matter. Before the Yuan dynasty, the court was in recess, and there is still half a month. What might happen? What happened? The girl was obviously worried and in a bad mood. She kept her head down and remained silent. Amitabha. Not long after, an old monk walked in and said, "The poor monk has met Princess Pingyang and Princess Anyang." "Master, there is no need to be polite." Princess Anyang looked at him and said with a smile, "I brought the princess here this time because I want to ask for a lottery. However, there are many people in front of the temple. We have special status and it is difficult to show up. I wonder if master can do it. It's convenient." Amitabha. The old monk nodded, looked at a young monk behind him, and said, "Mingzin, go get the lotus tube." The little monk ran out of the meditation room and quickly took out a lotus tube. The old monk looked at her and said, "Your Highness, please draw a lot from it." Princess Anyang looked at Zhao Man and whispered, "Take one." Zhao Man looked down at the lottery tube, hesitated for a moment, then reached out and pulled out a lottery. Princess Anyang leaned over and read, "How about I go to Taila, which is so close, and leave the gentleman to the mountain for a while? If I hear news about tigers and rabbits, I am determined to be busy and have nothing to do." "This is the lottery from above," the old monk said. "Her Royal Highness, you are indeed a person with profound blessings. Did you hear that? Master said it was a lucky draw." Princess Anyang patted Zhao Man's hand, looked at the old monk, and asked, "Master, what's the meaning of this lot?" The old monk clasped his hands together and said, "This hexagram is a sign of blessing in misfortune. Everything is bad in advance and good in the end. The explanation is, change hemp to get silk, strike people's feet to see clearly, and get good fortune due to disaster." "I don't know what the princess wants to ask." Princess Anyang looked at Zhao Man, who was still in a daze, turned around and asked, "What if I'm asking about marriage?" The old monk thought for a while and said, "The hexagram says that the princess's marriage will be in the year of the tiger and the rabbit, which is the first 2 months of this year." A look of surprise appeared on Princess Anyang's face. She looked at Zhao Man and asked, "Master, can you be more specific?" The old monk nodded and said, "This is the sign of High Palace. Yinmao is wood in the east, fire is in the south at noon, gold is in the west in Chinayu, water is in the north of Haizi, and Hai is in the north. According to the sign, the princess's marriage will be in north, and within these 2 months." Princess Anyang clasped her hands together and said, "Thank you, Master, for clearing up the confusion." Amitabha. The old monk recited the Buddha's name and said, "If the princess is fine, I will leave first." Princess Anyang stood up and said, "Master, walk slowly." After the old monk and the young monk left, Princess Anyang looked at Zhao Man in surprise and said, "This sign says that in the first 2 months of this year, your marriage is in the north. Isn't Chu in the north? All this is fate. Xiao Man, why are you still worrying? Maybe the Prince of Chu is really your ideal husband." Zhao Man's face did not show any joy or happiness. She stood up and said, "Sister Anyang, I want to go out for a walk alone." Princess Anyang said, "I'll let 2 guards follow you." Zhao Man shook her head and said, "No, I won't go far." After she walked out of the room, Princess Anyang looked at the 2 guards behind her and said, "Don't let the princess appear 10 feet away from you." "Yes," the 2 guards responded and walked out immediately. "The fortune sticks here are really effective. My cousin's second daughter got married at the end of last year after getting a fortune stick at the beginning of last year. The fortune stick said that her marriage would be this year. She got married at the end of the year." "That's right. I got a fortune stick for my daughter last year. The master said that her marriage would be in the south. Later, the matchmaker came to her house and said that it was a family in the south. Good fortune sticks are accurate, and bad fortune sticks are accurate. Widow Wang at the head of our village got a bad fortune stick saying that her marriage would not be smooth. The next day, she found out that her husband had a vixen outside. If she's not Widow Wang, where did her husband come from? She became a widow after she found out. The front hall of Xing'an Temple is full of pilgrims, but the back hall is unusually deserted. Only distinguished guests can enter. A figure walked aimlessly in the temple with a dazed look. Today is a temple fair. There are many female pilgrims in the temple. Those who can enter the backyard are also of extraordinary status, but no one stepped forward to stop them. The figure walked to a certain place in the backyard, looked up, and saw the three characters North Wing written on the plaque above. The fragrance of porridge wafted out from the wing. A strange sound came, and she rubbed her stomach, then remembered that she had not eaten anything all day. Smelling the faint fragrance of porridge, she felt extremely hungry. She stood at the door of the wing, hesitated for a moment, and then stepped in. Tang Ning had just finished a bowl of porridge and was about to serve the second bowl when someone walked in from outside the door. He raised his head and glanced casually, lowered his head and prepared to continue eating. The next moment, as if he had thought of something, he raised his head again and looked over. He saw Zhao Yingying standing at the door, staring at the porridge in his bowl. He thought for a moment, handed the bowl in his hand over, and asked, "Would you like a bowl?" You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 314. I want another bowl. Help me serve it. Stop eating vegetables. You've finished all my vegetables and tofu. Tang Ning looked at Zhao Man, who was devouring a bowl of white porridge. It was hard to imagine that this was a princess who had been pampered since she was a child and was well dressed and well fed. A bowl of white porridge actually tasted like delicacies to her. After he finished eating, he wiped his mouth, looked at Zhao Man, and asked, "Hasn't the princess had white porridge before?" No, Zhao Man replied, but the movements of his hands did not stop. Then what does the imperial kitchen usually do? Bird's nest soup, shark's fin soup, and those porridges I don't know the names of. Tang Ning thought that princesses were pampered, but she didn't expect that Zhao Yingying could be so easy to feed. A bowl of porridge and a dish of green vegetables and tofu would make her go. She was like a breath of fresh air among the ladies of princes and nobles. I'm full. Zhao Man put down the bowl, rubbed his slightly bulging belly, and leaned back comfortably on the chair. Tang Ning pointed at the corner of her mouth. Zhao Man looked at him and asked, "What?" Tang Ning said, "There are rice grains." Zhao Man reached out to pick it, but couldn't find it. Tang Ning stood up, walked to her side, and stretched out her hand. Zhao Man immediately ducked back cautiously. "What are you doing?" Tang Ning waved her hand, "Then you can pick it yourself." Zhao Man was startled, then sat down again. "You, please help me." Tang Ning reached out her hand again and found that she had straightened her chest and was sitting upright, as if she was doing something ceremonial. He stretched out his hand to help her take off the rice grains from the corner of her mouth. Zhao Man looked at him, her eyelashes fluttered, and then she quickly lowered her head. Tang Ning took back her hand and flicked the rice grains in her hand away. Then Zhao Man asked, "Why are you here?" Tang Ning put away the two people's dishes and chopsticks and said, "Come here with your family to ask for signatures." Zhao Man whispered, "I heard that the lottery in this temple is very good." They all said it was very effective. Tang Ning looked at her and asked curiously, "What did the princess do here? Could it be that she was asking for a fortune? What was the result?" Zhao Man said, "The master said it was signed." Tang Ning thought for a while and asked, "How much money did the princess donate for incense in this temple?" Zhao Man said, 1,000 taels. What's wrong? Give him 1,000 taels, not to mention the lucky draw. Tang Ning can make her draw even the super invincible lucky draw in the universe. It can be done secretly, it can be customized. Draw 3 times and you will get one. Then congratulations to the princess. She was worried about the marriage, so Tang Ning would not try to undermine her and make her sad at this time. She stood up and said, I have to leave. Goodbye, princess. Zhao Man watched him walk out without hesitation, glanced at his mouth, and said, if someone is so sad, I don't know what kind of friend it is to stay with someone. When I was grabbing food with Tang Ning just now, all those worrying things were forgotten. Although this bad guy liked to make her angry and argue with her, it seemed that all the worries were forgotten when she was with him. This was something she had never felt before. Her mood was a little complicated. After sitting in the room for a while, she walked out of the wing and walked to the courtyard. Bifang, do even bodhisattvas think so? She stood in the courtyard and murmured softly. She looked back and raised her head, just in time to see the 3 big characters on the plaque above her head. North Wing. It was already afternoon when I came back from the temple. After standing motionless for 2 hours in the morning, she was not idle when she came back. She went up the mountain and visited the temple. When Tang Ning got home, she was exhausted. Xiao Ru walked in from outside, shook the things in his hands, and asked, Brother Xiaoning, do you look good? What she holds in her hand is a pair of shoes that are only half the size of a palm. There is a tiger head in the front of the shoe, which is full of cartoon style. Zaira brought the tiger head shoes over and said with a smile, Miss Xiao Lian's family makes tiger head shoes. She just gave us 2 pairs. Miss Xiao Lian was the frivolous woman whom Tang Yao Yao helped today. When he came back today, he took her to his home outside the city. Tang Ning took the tiger toe shoes, looked at them carefully, and said, put them away. You can wear them for your children later. Su Ru's face turned red. She put the shoes away and said, Brother Xiaoning must be exhausted today. Let's rest for a while. I'll call you when it's time to eat. Tang Ning was actually very tired. She lay on the bed. Xiao Ru put her hand on his head and massaged it gently, and soon fell asleep. In the palace, Chen Huang got up from the couch and asked, what time is it now? Wei Jian came over and said, back to your majesty, Yushi has just passed. Chen Huang took a wet cloth handed over by Wei Jian, wiped his face, and asked, is Manner back? Wei Jian said, the princess has been waiting outside the palace for half an hour. She was worried that it would disturb His Majesty's sleep, so she didn't let anyone inform her. Chen Huang got off the bed and said, let her come in. Not long after, Zhao Man walked in from outside the door, bowed and said, Manner has met father. In the past, she had always barged in without hesitation, and she would not be so unfamiliar with him. Emperor Chen felt a little complicated and asked, how was Manner going out to play today? Zhao Man handed over a small object with both hands and said, Sister Anyang took me to Xing'an Temple. My father is busy with state affairs and works hard on weekdays. Manner asked for a peace charm for my father, hoping that my father would live long and safe. Chen Huang took the peace talisman with a smile on his face and said, Manner is interested. Zhao Man smiled slightly and said, Manner has something to ask my father. Chen Huang thought for a while and said, just tell me. Zhao Man said, Manner wants to leave the palace and open a mansion, please ask father for permission. Emperor Chen was startled. She suddenly became so sensible. He thought she was asking him not to let her marry far away from Chu. This matter was related to the relationship between the 2 countries. He could only bear to refuse. However, he did not expect that what she proposed was actually a request to open the government. After the royal princess reaches the age of 16, she can leave the palace and open a mansion. After getting married, the princess mansion will also be retained. It's just that she will go to Chu state soon. At this time, it is too late to choose a location and build a mansion. Zhao Man looked at him and continued, Manor just wants to have a place to live outside the palace. There is no need to build a separate princess palace. He can see more of the outside world. In the future, he will not be in a foreign country that even the capital cannot imagine. Emperor Chen thought for a while, nodded and said, Wei Jian, take the princess to the inner palace to see if there are any vacant gardens in the capital. Let her choose one from them. Wei Jian nodded and said, Princess, come with me. The Ministry of Internal Affairs is responsible for the daily expenses of the royal family and the management of the royal family's properties. After Wei Jian and Zhao Man walked in, the eunuch of the Ministry of Internal Affairs immediately saluted, I have met the princess, and I have met eunuch Wei. Wei Jian gave an order, and immediately a eunuch took out a map of the capital. On the map, the royal houses and gardens of the capital were marked in detail. These houses and gardens were often given to important ministers who had made great contributions. Wei Jian stepped forward and said, Princess, please see which one you like. Zhao Man walked to the map, looked at it carefully, pointed to a location on it, and said, That's it. A eunuch from the Ministry of Internal Affairs stepped forward and looked at a house near Ping'an County government. After being stunned for a moment, he said, Your Highness, this is not a royal house. Royal houses are marked with red circles. Wei Jian glanced at him and said, Since the princess likes it, just spend more money to buy it. This. The eunuch looked embarrassed, and immediately another eunuch stepped forward and said with a smile, Don't worry, eunuch Wei, the princess can move in within 3 days. Tang Ning encountered an annoying thing in recent days. When I was washing and tying my hair a few days ago, I discovered that his hair had grown to his waist. His hair was a little troubling when it was too long, and it was also inconvenient to tie it into a bun. Although there is a saying that the hair and skin of the body are influenced by the parents, in fact, people nowadays either never cut their hair all their lives, or it is more troublesome. They need to find an auspicious day and store or burn the cut hair. To show respect for ancestors and parents. He didn't have so many taboos anymore. He found the scissors for hair cutting, but just as he sat in front of the mirror, Zhonyi walked in, looked at him, and said in surprise, Mr. Sir, what are you going to do? Tang Ning sat in front of the bronze mirror, turned around and said, My hair is too long, let me cut it. No, 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 Zhonyi hurriedly stepped forward and said, It's unlucky if you can't cut your hair now. Tang Ning asked in surprise, Why? Have you forgotten that it is the first lunar month? Zhonyi looked at him and said, As the saying goes, if you cut your hair in the first lunar month, your uncle will die. Click. Tang Ning did not hesitate, her hands rose and fell. Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 315. Facts have proved that if there is no diamond, it is better not to take the porcelain job. It is like having good hair gnawed by a dog that he cut himself. In the end, he has to invite Xiu to clean up the mess. It was difficult to manage his long hair. After Xiu helped him cut it short, it had grown to waist length for several months. Tang Ning finally understood the troubles faced by female compatriots. He gathered up all the lost hair, found a brazier and burned it, and used a wooden stick to draw 2 circles on the ground. Tang family. Even though the Tang family has suffered a lot of twists and turns this year, the atmosphere during the new year is still lively. Since the 3rd day of the first lunar month, officials from the court have been visiting continuously. The temporary loss of power of the Tang family and King Duan has caused the trend in the court to tilt. Many people have fallen to King Kang's camp, but those who originally belonged to King Duan's line, but we must unite together and become more condensed. At this moment, a certain hall in the Tang family was filled with people. Master Shangshu, this time the Chu state came to ask for the marriage of Princess Pingyang. Although your majesty has put it on hold for the time being, it will definitely be officially discussed after the Yuan dynasty. This matter is the general trend and cannot be changed. An official looked at Tang Hui said, "This is a rare opportunity. We should seize this opportunity, strike while the iron is hot, and reverse the current situation." An official said, "Yes, Mr. Tang, the Prince of Chu can marry Princess Pingyang, and King Duan can also marry the Princess of Chu. If King Duan can marry the Princess of Chu, it will be of great benefit to us." Tang Hui did not speak. Tang Chi stood up, looked at everyone, and explained, "You sirs don't know something. The Emperor of Chu has no heirs except the Prince of Chu. This matter is naturally not feasible." An official thought for a while, shook his head and said, "But we can't let this opportunity go in vain. After His Majesty agrees to Chu's marriage proposal, there will be officials from the Ministry of Rights accompanying him. We will be one step ahead of King Kong. If we ignore this opportunity, it's a pity. Since the Chu state has taken the initiative to ask for marriage, it means that they also hope to stabilize their diplomatic relations with the Chen state, and they will definitely not refuse the marriage proposal. In my opinion, Chu state will not let go of such an opportunity. If there is no princess, the next best thing is to find a princess to make her a princess. Isn't it just as feasible? Master Tang, this matter is worthy of consideration." Everyone was talking around the charcoal stove. Tang Hui stretched out his hand, pressed it down, and said, "I will discuss this matter with concubine Hui." As soon as he finished speaking, a servant came forward to report that the banquet was ready. Tang Hui stretched out his hands to everyone and said, "My lords, please." Everyone immediately stretched out their hands. "Master Tang, please." When Tang Hui stood up, his feet accidentally touched the charcoal stove, and there was a clang sound. The charcoal stove overturned, the charcoal fire scattered, and several pieces of red-hot charcoal fell directly on his feet. The crowd dispersed. Tang Hui subconsciously stomped back, but accidentally knocked down the chair. The wooden table also shook. The teacup on the table fell to the ground and broke into pieces. Tang Hui's body was unstable. He fell to the ground, his palm pressed against the broken teacup, and it was immediately stained red with blood. Everyone in the hall was suddenly shocked and in chaos. "Master Tang, are you okay? Hurry and help Mr. Tang get up. Mr. Zhong, please invite the doctor over quickly." On the occasion of the New Year, Tang Hui, the Minister of Rights, burned his foot and scratched his hand at his home. Everyone was in a hurry. Tang Hui was helped back to his room to rest. The Tang family also had no intention of preparing for the banquet. The officials stayed for a while and then left. Tang Chi sent everyone out of the house, cupped his hands and said, "Masters, please go slowly." One person cupped his hands and said, "It's snowy and the roads are slippery. Master Tang, please send us here." "It doesn't matter." Tang Chi smiled, took 2 steps forward, raised his hands and said, "Today something happened suddenly, I will make up for today's banquet tomorrow." Before he finished speaking, his feet suddenly slipped, and he rolled down the steps. He hit the stone lion at the entrance of Tang Mansion, and his head was bleeding profusely. "The weather is so cold." Xiaoju rubbed his hands and put them on the stove to bake. He sat in the pavilion in the yard and watched the snowflakes falling outside the yard. Tang Ning sat in front of the stove, inserted a steamed bun with chopsticks and put it on the fire to bake. It started to snow 2 days ago, but maybe because his physical fitness had improved, he didn't feel how cold it was. It was so thick that he couldn't feel the cold at all, but it was too stuffy, so he simply carried the heater into the pavilion. Green ants cultivate new wine and a small red clay stove. When it snows, the ancients drank while enjoying the snow. It sounds like a unique artistic conception. In this environment, while baking buns on the stove, Xiaoju, who has been taking drugs all day, small talk, the artistic conception is not so satisfying. Especially the sound of ping ping pong 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 coming from the yard next door makes people feel irritable for no reason. Tang Ning thought of something, looked at him and asked, "Is your diarrhea feeling better?" Xiao Ju said, "It was fine yesterday." Tang Ning handed him the baked steamed buns and said, "The baked steamed buns are not bad. Do you want one?" "No more." Xiao Ju shook his head and said, "I don't know what's wrong. I always have diarrhea when I eat at your house recently." After hearing Xiao Ju talk about diarrhea, Tang Ning didn't want to eat it and put it aside. The old beggar would use this thing to drink when he was hungry. Xiao Ju remembered something and suddenly looked at him and said, "Tang Hui and Tang Qi are both injured. Have you heard about it?" "What?" Tang Ning was stunned and asked, "Who told me this? Is it serious or will it cost my life?" "It's not serious." Xiao Ju shook his head and said, "It is said that Tang Hui was burned by a charcoal stove at home, and Tang Qi fell while walking and broke 2 ribs. Tang Ning touched her hair. "The first month of the year has not passed yet. The problem is that Jiu has already cut his hair short. Cutting it any longer would not be in line with the aesthetics of this era. If he stands with Xiaoju, others will think that Xiaoju is more handsome." After thinking carefully for a moment, he gave up the idea. "Are you familiar with Princess Pingyang?" Xiaoju looked at him and asked. "She is going to marry to Chu State." "I'm not very familiar with it." Tang Ning shook her head and said, "However, the marriage will be beneficial to both Chen and Chu. She should not be able to escape." Thinking that she hadn't seen Zhao Yingying for several days, Tang Ning was really worried. A little girl whose mind was not yet fully mature was used as a bargaining chip for political marriage and married to a distant neighboring country. Come back again, it's actually quite pitiful when I think about it. It was also cruel to her. It's a pity that as a friend, he can't help her much. The general trend makes his personal power seem so small. It's not just Princess Pingyang. Xiaoju looked at him and said, "I heard that King Duan also wants to marry the Chu kingdom. If this can be achieved, King Duan's status in His Majesty's heart will immediately become important." Tang Ning is not worried about this matter. Prince Duan is smart and Prince Kong is not a fool. Will he watch helplessly as Prince Duan gains a powerful external ally? Although King Kong was a bit stingy, he had many discerning counselors around him and would not make such a stupid mistake. He waved his hand and said, "Prince Kong is more anxious about this matter than you and me." Xiaoju nodded and said, "That's true. If concubine Tang Hui seeks this matter from your majesty, concubine Zhang Xian will not show weakness. Your majesty will never show favor to Prince Kong and Prince Duan. When the time comes, it will depend on their respective abilities." He was about to continue speaking when he suddenly frowned, looked in one direction, and asked, "What are you doing in the yard next door? Why is it so noisy?" "I don't know." Tang Ning shook her head. Tang Yao Yao lived next door on one side of the yard. He was not very familiar with the owner of the house on the other side. Since yesterday, there had been a lot of noise there. He didn't know what was going on there. He stood up, walked to the corner, stepped on a stone, and looked over. In the courtyard next door, a girl was wearing a cloak and commanding the guards in the courtyard. "Move these 2 big rocks to the corner. I don't want the rockery over there. This pavilion, forget it, let's keep it for now." She glanced around the courtyard, looked at the head protruding from the courtyard wall, leaned down, grabbed a handful of snow, kneaded it into a snowball, and smashed it over. "Let you take a peek." Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 316. Boom. The snowball thrown by Zhao Man missed Tang Ning's head by half a foot, and accurately hit the head of Xiaoju, who was climbing up the wall with him to peek. Contour integral pine proportionality apple proportionality contour integral says. Who is so short-sighted? Xiaoju wiped the snow from his eyebrows. When he saw the figures in the courtyard, the anger on his face melted like ice and snow in an instant, and he praised, "The princess's hits are really accurate." Tang Ning climbed over the wall, looked at the guards busy in the courtyard, and asked in surprise, "Princess, why are you here?" Zhao Man looked at him and said matter-of-factly, "This is my home, why can't I be here?" Tang Ning was stunned, unsure of the channel. "This is your home?" Zhao Man looked at him and asked, "I don't have to live in the palace anymore. This is the house I bought, okay?" Tang Ning nodded and said, "Okay." Emperor Chen would allow her to leave the palace and open a mansion, which was a bit unexpected, but it did not rule out that he felt guilty for Zhao Yingying and wanted to make up for it in the last period of time. Tang Ning discovered a long time ago that the emperor of the Chen kingdom was not actually a decisive emperor. He could not be a cold-blooded emperor, but he could not be a father who loved and cared for his children. Regardless of his status as an emperor, he is no different from ordinary people. However, if the princess opens a mansion, she can open a mansion. As long as she doesn't live in Tang Mansion, she can live anywhere. "Princess, continue your work, I'm going back." He turned around and looked around, then returned to his yard. Zhao Man stood in the courtyard, gently brushing the snowflakes from her hair, looking at the place separated by a wall, with a little melancholy in her eyes. Xiaoju stood in the yard, looked at Tang Ning, and asked in surprise, "Why is Princess Pingyang here?" Tang Ning explained, "His Majesty allowed her to leave the house, so she bought the house." Xiaoju thought for a while and asked, "There are so many houses in the capital, why did she buy this one? If I remember correctly, this house originally had an owner, right? The royal family has so many mansions and gardens that she can't live in, why do we live next door to your house?" "You ask me how I know." Tang Ning glanced at him and said, "If you are really curious, why don't you ask the princess yourself?" He was also curious that Zhao Man would move here. Maybe it was because of the good feng shui here, or maybe she just liked it here. The person named Xiao was almost 20 years old. He had nothing to do with marrying his wife. He cared about such trivial matters all day long. He deserved to be single. Xiaoju looked at him, his eyes lingered on him for a long time, and asked, "If we are friends, just tell me, what is the relationship between you and the princess?" "The princess is a princess, and I am me. What relationship do we have?" Tang Ning glanced at him and asked, "What do you think about in your dirty mind all day long?" Xiaoju looked at him and said seriously, "Don't blame me for not reminding you. The princess is going to the Chu kingdom to get married. You must not cause any trouble." Tang Ning couldn't understand what was going on in Xiaoju's dirty mind. She glanced at him and said, "Do you think, if it's what you think, I will sit in the pavilion with you and bake steamed buns?" Xiaoju thought for a while and felt that what he said made sense, and nodded, "Yes, if that were true, the envoys of the Chu state would have been killed by you long ago, and maybe even the crown prince of the Chu state would have been killed by you. They are all living well now, so it shouldn't be. Generally speaking, what a dirty person thinks about is a true reflection of his dirty mind." Tang Ning wondered whether Xiaoju's psychology had been distorted to some extent due to physical defects in the past 10 years. Will always use impure thoughts to speculate on others. But to be honest, he could understand that Zhao Man wanted to move out of the cage-like palace and live a carefree and free time before leaving, but why did she want to move next door to his house? Could it be want to have a meal? Let's ignore Zhao Man's matters. There are still 10 days left before Shangyuan, and it is also the last 10 days of his vacation. Yesterday, he made an agreement with Xiao Ru Xiaoi and Tang Yao Yao to go to the mountains to play today. The snow in the capital doesn't look heavy, but there should be a thick layer of snow in the mountains outside the capital. With this level of snow, it's best to catch rabbits and pheasants. Staying at home is idle, so it's better to go out and get some fresh air. Xiaoju liked to eat at home a few days ago. These days, he went back by himself as soon as it was time to eat. "Xiao Ru said while packing the things to prepare for tomorrow, Miss Xiao Lian's house is at the foot of the mountain. We will go home tomorrow, you can stay at her house temporarily. As she was talking, she suddenly stopped what she was doing, looked at the girl standing at the door, and asked, "Girl, who are you looking for?" Tang Ning turned around and saw Zhao Man, who was wrapped like a bear, standing at the door. "You must be Mrs. Tang." Zhao Man stepped forward and said, "I am your new neighbor." Xiru and Xiao I were surprised by this neighbor who suddenly visited. The previous owner of the house next door had never spoken a word to them. Especially after hearing about her princess status, surprise turned into shock. The two stood up and immediately saluted her. "I have met Her Royal Highness." Zhao Man smiled and said, "We will be neighbors from now on, and there is no one else here, so there is no need to be polite. Your Tang Ning and I are friends, and we will be friends from now on." There was a princess friend inexplicably. Xiao Ru and Xiao Yi were a little nervous. This was their first time meeting a guest of the princess rank. "Uncle, miss, it's time to eat." Qing ran in from outside, interrupting the slightly dull atmosphere. Zhongyi looked at Zhao Man and asked quietly, "Princess, if you don't mind, why don't you have a meal here before leaving?" "No problem." Zhao Man smiled and said, "I'm not picky about food." Tang Ning guessed correctly, she really came here to eat for free. After not seeing her for a few days, Zhao Man now is completely different from the Zhao Yingying he knew. She used to be willful and a little bit stupid, but now she seems to have grown up a lot. Although throwing snowballs at people is still a little childish, it is not the kind of childishness he used to have. "I will stay here for a few more days. From now on, I will call you Sister Zhong and Sister Su. It's our first meeting. This is a small gift. I hope you will accept it. You two sisters are so beautiful. It is a blessing for him to marry you." After a meal, Zhao Man has successfully become friends with them. Xiao Ru Xiao Yi is not so restrained anymore. She even invites her to participate in tomorrow's activities. Zhao Man naturally happily agrees. She calls her sister on the left and on the right. It is very smooth. The gifts she gave were not ordinary. The box of pearls, the smallest one was as big as a pigeon egg, and the pair of hairpins were obviously made by the master craftsman in the palace. Tang Ning didn't say a word throughout the whole process. Occasionally, she looked at Zhao Man with strange eyes. It was hard to imagine that a person would change so much in a few days. A few days ago, she was like a child, lively like a cheerful stream, with her thoughts written on her face. But now, the stream has merged into a deep pool. Tang Ning can't tell what she wants to do at all. Xiao Ru and Xiao Yi had no objection to the event tomorrow with one more person, and naturally he would not have any either. As a princess, Zhao Man was lucky, having lived a life of luxury since childhood, but as a woman, she was unfortunate, so during this period, she should be given more leniency. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 317. Between New Year's Eve and the Lantern Festival, it is a rare holiday for officials. Even the common people will stop their busy work, go out of their homes, and visit relatives and friends. The streets are crowded with cars and horses, and extremely congested. At this time, shopping in the city is obviously not a good choice. Tang Ning has no relatives and friends in the capital, so he simply takes his family out of the city to play. The outside of the city and the city are like two different worlds. The foot of the mountain is far away from the hustle and bustle. All you can see is a vast expanse of white. If it weren't for the green cypresses in the mountains, I'm afraid it would be difficult to open my eyes. Rabbit, there's a rabbit. Zhao Man had just got off the carriage and saw the grey shadow on the snow, so he ran over shouting. The grass was full of snow, and the short-legged hare was not as fast as usual, but it was not something Zhao Man could catch, and it soon ran into the woods and disappeared. She came back dejectedly, and before she could speak, she saw something moving in the snow again. This time, she learned her lesson and tiptoed over, but in the end, the rabbit escaped. There were naturally not so many rabbits in the grove. In order not to disappoint them, Tang Ning had someone come in the morning to secretly release dozens of rabbits, so Zhao Yingying was so lucky. The guards of the princess's mansion cleared a clearing and set up the tent in a short while, but no one was willing to come in except Tang Ning and Zhao Yuan. It was the first time that Zhao Man encountered such an interesting thing as catching rabbits in the wild on a snowy day, so naturally she would not stay in the tent. Xiao Xiao and Fang Xinyu found a place to make a snowman, and Tang Yao Yao went out hunting alone. If she was not there today, they would have nothing to do. Zhao Yuan was not originally included in the travel plan, but Fang Xiaoyu happened to meet him when she left home, so he followed her shamelessly. There was also a little girl named Wang who was Fang Xiaoyu's friend in the capital. Tang Ning was preparing food in the tent. Zhao Yuan looked at the little girl and said, "Sister Wang, how about we go out and compete in catching rabbits?" The little girl blinked and asked, "How do we compete?" Zhao Yuan thought for a while and said, "If I catch it first, I will kiss you. If you catch it first, you will kiss me." Tang Ning sometimes thought that Emperor Chen was an emperor. Although he was indecisive, he was fair and just. Concubine Fang Shu was also a reasonable person. Where did Zhao Yuan learn this shamelessness since childhood? Now he understood that the shameless gene of the old Fang family, like Fang Jie, should have been passed down to Zhao Yuan from the previous generation. Zhao Yuan talked to the little girl for a while, then looked at Tang Ning and asked, "Sir, aren't you going out to catch rabbits?" In order not to affect her picking up girls, Tang Ning walked out of the tent and saw Xiru and Xiaoi walking over from the house at the foot of the mountain. The servants of the Tang family put the dry firewood on the open ground. These firewoods were sent by Miss Lian'er. They were also sent with some mountain products such as dried mushrooms. He planned to make a pheasant stew with mushrooms later, which would be just right for use. Tang Ning originally wanted to pay Miss Lian'er some money, but she insisted not to, saying that it was just to repay their help that day. Tang Ning no longer insisted, and waited until the Lantern Festival to secretly buy all the tiger head shoes she sold. He stood beside Xiao Xiao and watched her make a snowman. There was a gust of wind behind him. Tang Ning had no time to dodge and was hit on the head by Zhao Man's sneak attack snowball. Hit, he turned around and saw Zhao Man standing in the distance, jumping and jumping with joy. Tang Ning grabbed a handful of snow from the ground, rolled it into a ball and threw it over, hitting her head. Zhao Man hid behind a tree, dodging and fighting back. At first, it was a fight between two people, but when Zhao Man was hit by several snowballs and none of them hit her, she called the guards of the princess's mansion in. Tang Ning's two fists were no match for 8 hands, and she was quickly defeated. The two shivering people hid by the fire to warm their hands. Tang Yao Yao came from a distance with 3 pheasants and 2 hares and threw them on the ground. Zhao Man jumped up from the ground and said in surprise, "Sister Tang, you are so powerful. I didn't catch a single rabbit just now." It was actually hard for Tang Ning to imagine that with Zhao Man and Tang Yao Yao's personalities, they would call each other sisters and become friends in such a short time. The reason was that when Su Mei came home yesterday, the two of them happened to find that they had a common enemy, and the enemy of the enemy was a friend. The deep revolutionary friendship between the two women was established so easily. Tang Ning sent 2 guards to the stream to deal with the pheasants and rabbits. Zhao Man looked at Tang Ning and said, "If Sister Tang was here just now, you would have lost long ago." Tang Ning glanced at her and said, "You are a coward who can only hide behind a tree. If you have the ability, don't ask for help." "Who said I was a coward?" Zhao Man put her hands on her hips and said, "How about we compete in courage?" Zhao Yingying, who was afraid of snakes and people, wanted to compete with her in courage. This was the real courage. Tang Ning smiled, looked at her and asked, "How do you compete?" Zhao Man put his arm around Tang Yaoyao's waist, hugged her and kissed her on the face, looked at Tang Ning in a demonstrative manner, and asked, "Do you dare?" Tang Ning thought carefully for a while and decided to go build a snowman with Xiao Xiao and the others. He admitted that in some aspects, Zhao Yingying was indeed much braver than him. Today was just an ordinary camping trip. Zhao Man was as happy as a child throughout the whole process. He drank several bowls of mushroom chicken soup and his stomach was full. After eating and drinking, she walked out of the tent, leaned comfortably against a tree, looked at the forest in the distance, and murmured, "It's great. A bowl of white porridge and a bowl of game soup could satisfy such a princess," which really subverted his imagination of princesses. "Thank you, I had a lot of fun today." Zhao Man waved to him, clearly drinking soup, but his eyes were blurry as if he had drank wine. Although Zhao Man had a lot of fun during the day, he had a fever when he went home at night. When Tang Ning came to see her, she was already asleep. A palace maid stood in front of the bed and whispered, "The imperial doctor said that Her Royal Highness Princess has suffered from cold and has taken medicine. Master Tang, please come back tomorrow." Tang Ning regretted a little. If he had known that she would catch a cold, he would not have played with her today. "Take good care of the princess," she said to the palace maid, and when she walked out of the room, she heard a voice from the bedside. "Bad guy, I'll crush you to death. Rabbit is so cute, how can you eat rabbit? It's so delicious, I want more." Tang Ning looked back, shook her head, and walked out of the princess mansion. In the bedroom, Zhonyi had already made the bed and was waiting for him. She sat on the edge of the bed, looked at Tang Ning, and asked, "Ms. Sir, people say that the princess is about to marry to the Chu country. Is it true?" Tang Ning nodded and said, "There is a 90% chance." Zhonyi sighed and said, "I can tell that although she looks happy, that's just the appearance. In terms of delicate thoughts, neither Xiao Ru nor Tang Yaoyao could match her." Tang Ning held her waist and said, "Being in the royal family, many things cannot be controlled by one's own control, and princesses may not be happier than ordinary women." Tang Ning couldn't eliminate the source of her worries, but it could make her forget them for a while. The days between New Year's Eve and Shangyuan were the most prosperous times of the year in the capital. There were so many things she had never seen or played with. Curious gadgets. However, no matter how prosperous it is, it will return to peace after the Yuan dynasty. On the 16th day of the first lunar month, when Tang Ning arrived at the Ministry of Punishment, the second court meeting in the early Ding Yuan year had already begun for half an hour. The most important issue at this court meeting is the Prince of Chu's proposal to marry Princess Pingyang. Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 318. Tang Ning was sitting in the check-in room, holding a thin book in her hand. The collection of grievances has been sorted out and printed. He has the first edition in his hands. In the future, some actual cases will be compiled and published, and the publishing expenses will be paid directly by the imperial court. He checked for any omissions, then sat in a daze. Today is the first morning court after the court break. The Minister of Punishment has not returned yet, indicating that the morning court has not ended yet. The imperial court has not been functioning for half a month, and it should have accumulated a lot of things. Just like the Ministry of Justice, it has not been open for half a month. As soon as the office opened today, all the county offices from all over the country sent over all the accumulated case files. The doctor of the Xingbu Yamen has not yet recovered from his foot injury and has not returned to the Yamen. All matters of the Xingbu Yamen are still decided by Tang Ning alone. Around the time of the Shangyuan dynasty, the capital was the most prosperous and noisy, and it was also a time when security incidents were prone to occur. In the past few days, too many people gathered in the capital area, and large numbers of people caused chaos. Among the stack of files on Tang Ning's desk, several of the cases involved human lives. Of course, these cases did not require the Ministry of Justice to investigate them one by one. Tang Ning opened the files one by one, found out the problematic ones, and filed them for retrial. The others were submitted to the Ministry of Justice for further review. Like the Ministry of Punishment, after the Yuan dynasty, all major government offices in the capital were extremely busy. In Ping'an County Government Office, Zhou Mingli frowned as he looked at a case file in his hand. After Zhao Zhija had reviewed several files, he looked up and saw the expression on his face and asked, "What's the matter?" "I encountered a troublesome case. The complaint in this case involves Marquis Yanping, Marquis Chang Xing, Uncle Yang Chuan, and Uncle Huaning." Zhou Mingli shook his head and said, "I'm afraid it won't be easy to investigate." Zhao Zhija looked at him and said, "You have His Majesty's token in hand. Is there anything else you dare not check?" "Yes." Zhou Mingli nodded and said, "Peng Chen, ask people to go to the house of Marquis Yanping, Marquis Chang Xing, and Uncle Yang Chuan to meet with Uncle Ning, and summon these people to the county government for questioning." Peng Chen cupped his hands and walked out quickly. Yanping Hao Mansion. The capital is a place where powerful people gather. Among the many princes, Yanping Ho has a deep background. The eldest son of the family works in the palace, so he is considered to be the best among the powerful children. If nothing happens, he can continue the glory of the Ho family. In addition, the Ho mansion has taken refuge with King Kong in the early years. Now King Kong is as powerful as the king in the court. If he takes a small step forward, he will be able to set foot in the East Palace. By then, the Yanping Ho mansion will also be considered to have the merit of following the dragon. Maybe it will. You can make further progress. Marquis Yanping was sitting in the study, taking a sip and only drank half of a cup of tea. Then a shadow walked in and called out "Dad" slightly nervously. Marquis Yanping glanced at his youngest son and asked, "What trouble did your boy get into again?" His eldest son was considered outstanding among the children of the powerful, but this time he had been naughty since he was a child and had caused constant troubles. However, he didn't take it to heart. He was just young and energetic, fighting for power and jealousy outside, and fighting fiercely. This is a common thing in the families of powerful people. As long as no lives are caused, each family will let it go. As for other disasters, with the power of the family, it can be easily settled. "It's not a big disaster." The young man looked up and said hesitantly, "Li Ping and the others were here yesterday. We accidentally set a fire and burned down a house outside the city. If you burn down a private house, you will be so nervous." Marquis Yanping put down the teacup heavily and said angrily, "You have killed someone." The young man trembled and said in a trembling voice, "No, I don't know." Marquis Yanping's face darkened. If it was an ordinary disaster, it could be settled with money or power. Once a human life occurred, it would not be that easy to suppress it within the confines of the capital. As soon as he stood up from the chair, an old man knocked on the door of the study room and walked in. He glanced at the young man, looked at the Marquis of Yanping, and said, "Master, someone from Ping'an County government asked the young master to go to the county government office to ask questions." Case. Fear appeared on the young man's face and he asked, "Dad, what should I do?" Marquis Yanping glared at him and said angrily, "Tell me what you guys are doing first." The young man whispered, We just wanted to spend money to play with that woman, but she didn't let me, and even lit a torch to scare us, so we let people take his torch and burn down their house." "You bastard!" Marquis Yanping couldn't help but kicked him on the leg, and said angrily, "You don't want to play with so many women in the brothel, but you insist on finding those innocent women. Why did I give birth to you?" The young man lowered his head and said nothing. Usually they just use force, but with their status, they can settle it with a little money at most. Yesterday, the old man was really aroused, and he was impulsive. At this moment, he regretted it. The old housekeeper hurriedly stepped forward and said, "Master, now is not the time to blame the young master. The people from Ping'an County government are still waiting outside. If it were half a year ago, Ping'an County Yamen would not have the courage to come to Yanping Marquee Mansion to ask for someone, but since the new county magistrate took office, he has somehow gained His Majesty's favor. If he entered Ping'an County Yamen, it would be impossible. It's hard to come out." Marquis Yanping looked at the young man and asked, "Who else was there besides you yesterday?" The young man immediately said, "There are also Li Ping, Kui Zhang, and Sunan." Marquis Yanping looked at the housekeeper and said, "Take him to Ping'an County Yamen first to find out the truth, and then come back and report immediately." The old man nodded and said, "Yes, sir." Marquis Yanping waved and said, "In addition, send someone to invite Marquis Chang Xing, Uncle Yang Chuan, and Uncle Huining." The old man bowed and said, "I'll ask someone to invite you right away." Not long after the old man and the young man walked out, several carriages stopped at the Yanping Marquee Mansion, and a figure hurriedly got off the carriage. In the mansion, Marquis Yanping looked at several people and said in surprise, "I just sent someone to invite you, and you arrived so quickly." One person looked at Marquis Yanping and asked, "I guess Ping'an County government has sent people here too, right?" Marquis Yanping looked at them, nodded, and said, "You are here probably because of this matter." "Why, the matter is very serious." The person who just spoke said, "A life was lost. As you know, this Ping'an County magistrate is very difficult to deal with. He has His Majesty's support behind him, so we can't interfere." Marquis Yanping nodded and said, "I know that the magistrate of Ping'an County, Xiao Anbo, fell into his hands. If he doesn't let go of this case, it will indeed be difficult to handle." He thought for a while and said, "I have a plan." Tang Ning spent a whole day reading files in the criminal department. When she left the office, she was already a little dizzy. The affairs of the Ministry of Justice are busier than those of the Ministry of Revenue. Fortunately, in another half-month, the burden on his shoulders will be relieved. I don't know where he will go next. As long as he is not in the Ministry of Personnel, he should be able to relax for a while. Xiaoju stood waiting for him at the entrance of the criminal department. This was something she had agreed with him yesterday. Tang Ning rubbed her eyebrows and asked, "How was the situation in the morning?" Xiaoju glanced at him and asked, "Why are you so concerned about the princess? Isn't it okay to care about friends?" Tang Ning glanced at him and asked, "Tell me, has the imperial court reached an agreement with the Chu envoy?" "There is no result yet." Xiaoju shook his head and said, "We can't just agree to whatever the envoy of the Chu state asks us to do. We have to refuse a few times to look like a great country. By the way, there is one more thing," Xiaoju suddenly said. "In the court, Prince Kong and Prince Duan both proposed to marry Princess Changning of Chu state. Guess who your Majesty finally chose?" Tang Ning shook her head, "I don't know. Princess Changning would marry whomever she wanted to marry, but she wouldn't marry him anyway." Tang Ning was generally not very interested in things that had nothing to do with her. Prince Kong, Xiaoju said with a somewhat surprised tone, "Princess Changning is the only daughter of the regent of the Chu kingdom, and her status is extraordinary. I thought that your Majesty would choose Prince Duan to rebalance their power, but I didn't expect that your Majesty would choosing King Kong. It seems that during this period, King Kang's status in His Majesty's heart has been much higher than that of King Duan." Tang Ning and Xiaoju had guessed that this move by Emperor Chen would exacerbate the power gap between Prince Kong and Prince Duan. Perhaps in his mind, the balance of the crown prince's favor had already tilted. Thinking of something interesting, Xiaoju looked at Tang Ning again and said, "There is another thing that is very strange. The Princess Changning from the Chu kingdom is actually also named Li Tianlan. She has the same name as Miss Li. What a coincidence." Skillful. He talked a lot, looked at Tang Ning, and said in surprise, "Why don't you speak anymore? Why are you speaking?" Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 319. After saying a lot but getting no response, Xiaoju looked at Tang Ning and asked in surprise, "Are you listening to me?" Tang Ning looked back at him and asked, "What did you just say? What is the name of Princess Changning of Chu State?" Li Tianlan Xiaoju looked at him and said, "If she hadn't been the only daughter of the regent of Chu, I would have thought she was your Miss Li." Xiaoju seemed to have remembered something, and suddenly asked in surprise, "It seems that I have never seen Miss Li since your wedding. Where has she gone? Has she left the capital?" Tang Ning stretched her arms, cracked her knuckles, and asked, "Why did Prince Kong and Prince Duan marry Princess Changning of the Chu kingdom?" "You can't understand this," Xiaoju glanced at him and said, "They originally wanted to marry a princess from the Chu kingdom, but unfortunately there was no princess in the Chu kingdom, so they had to settle for the next best thing. Although this regent is only a princess, he is a prince, but he is a brother-in-law with the Emperor of Chu. In the past few years when the Emperor of Chu was seriously ill, he took care of all state affairs, which shows his status in the Chu state. If either King Kong or King Duan can marry the Princess of Changning, there is a great possibility of gaining external support from the Chu state. King Duan wants to regain the situation, and King Kong wants to expand his advantage, so marriage is the best way." Tang Ning continued to ask, "Did the Chu envoy agree?" "That's not true." Xiaoju shook his head and said, "Of course they can't make the decision on this kind of thing. They should propose marriage in front of the Emperor of Chu when they escort Princess Pingyang to the Chu kingdom." Xiaoju patted him on the shoulder and said, "It is better for King Kong to benefit than for King Duan to benefit. Once King Kong comes to power, King Duan and the Tang family will fall. This can be regarded as revenge for you. Even if the two parties in the court have to consider the issue of seizing the heir, it is Emperor Chen's thoughts that ultimately play the decisive role. King Duan had been defeated in the previous battle. Emperor Chen did not choose to support King Duan, but continued to favor King Kong, which explained a lot of things." Xiaoju was a little surprised and said, "You made a wise choice by siding with King Kong back then." Tang Ning looked at him and asked, "Who said I was on King Kong's side?" Thinking of something in his mind, Tang Ning was a little absent-minded while eating. It wasn't until Zhongyi tugged on his sleeve that he raised his head and asked in confusion, "What's wrong?" Zhongyi whispered, "Dad just asked you something." "Ah," Tang Ning looked at Zhong Mingli and said apologetically, "I'm sorry, father-in-law, I was a little distracted just now." "The family doesn't have to be so isolated." Zhong Mingli waved his hand and said, "On the first day of the opening of the Yamen, the Ministry of Punishment mentioned all the serious cases in each county Yamen. There should be a lot of things to be busy with, so you don't need to worry. Just deal with it one by one." Tang Ning was slightly startled, "Is this happening?" The Ministry of Punishment has always avoided difficult cases involving local government offices, hiding wherever possible. How could it take the initiative to intervene? Zhong Mingli was also a little confused. "You don't know?" Tang Ning thought for a while and said, "Perhaps it's not time to submit it to the Criminal Department office urgently." Zhong Mingli nodded and said, "I heard that the Ministry of Punishment is compiling a book that records the review and inspection methods of various cases. After the compilation is completed, all major county offices will use the procedures as a basis to standardize case trials." Tang Ning nodded and said, "This book has been compiled and will be distributed to all major government offices after His Majesty has read it. The book, the collection of clearing wrongs, will be used as the official forensic guidance book, and there must be no mistakes." Tang Ning checked it one last time before calling a scribe over and said, "Give this book to Mr. Su." After the scribe took the book, Tang Ning asked again, "Aren't there any new files delivered today?" "My lord, no." The scribe bowed and replied. A hint of doubt appeared on Tang Ning's face, then she waved her hand and said, "I understand, you can go down." In a certain room of the Ministry of Punishment, Su Cheng, the assistant minister of the Ministry of Punishment, took the resolution of wrongs, casually flipped through 2 pages, put it aside, and said, "Generally, there will be no omissions in the matters that Chief Tang is responsible for. When Lord Shangshu comes back, send it directly to Lord Shangshu." After the scribe left, another person walked in quickly and whispered a few words to Su Cheng. Su Cheng waved his hand and said, "The Ministry of Punishment has done what it can do, and they should be able to handle the next thing." The man nodded and asked again, "Sir, those cases that were brought up from the county government yesterday?" Su Cheng thought for a moment and said, "Let it go for now. Wait until Mr. Yang comes to the Yamen, and then turn around." According to the regulations of the Ministry of Punishment, all cases submitted to the Ministry of Punishment must first go through the preliminary trial of the Punishment Department. Now the doctor of the Punishment Ministry is recuperating at home. The person in charge is Tang Ning. Although Tang Ning seems to be from King Kong, she is not under his control. Just in case, it's better to be careful. The man responded in a low voice and walked out. Tang Ning had only been in the Ministry of Punishment for less than half a month. Tang Ning breathed a sigh of relief. She had been facing the darkest and cruelest things in the world all day long, and even her mood was greatly affected. As soon as it was time to leave the Yamen, he walked out of the Penal Department Yamen. Different from the past, there seemed to be some commotion at the Yamen gate today. A Yamen servant stood at the door, waved his hand impatiently, and said angrily, come on, the Punishment Department Yamen is not the place for you to cause trouble. If you dare to disrupt the order of the Yamen again, you will be served with sticks." An old woman knelt at the door of the Yamen, tugged on his trousers, and said in a trembling voice, "Sir, we have a grievance." Still not leaving, the punishment official's face became even more angry, and he took a step back suddenly. The old woman fell to the ground, and the woman beside her immediately went to help her. The prison officer waved his hand impatiently and said loudly, "Come here, drive them away." "Wait a minute." Tang Ning walked out of the Yamen and asked, "What happened?" The Yamen servant turned around and immediately bowed and said, "Sir, these 2 unruly people are causing trouble at the Yamen gate. I will drive them away immediately." Tang Ning looked at the woman and the woman. When her eyes swept over the latter's face, she asked in surprise, "Miss Lianer, why are you here?" "Yanpinghao Mansion." "You bastards, this is the capital, don't think that you can do whatever you want if your family has some power." Marquis Yanping looked at the 4 young people kneeling in the hall and said in a deep voice, "I don't know how many pairs of eyes are watching outside. You have caused little trouble, but if you bring harm to the family, it would be a pity for you to die." A man stepped forward and said, "Brother Chen, calm down. This matter has passed. From now on, we can just restrain our juniors more. We don't need to be so angry." Another person thought for a while and asked, "Brother Chen, Brother Li, is this matter really foolproof?" Marquis Yanping's face softened slightly and he said, "With His Highness's current position in the court, Su Cheng, the Minister of Punishment, still knows how to advance and retreat. It is better for the case to go to the Punishment Department than to the Ping'an County Yamen. However, if you want to be sure, you still have to do something, be more thorough." One person thought for a while, nodded and said, "Leave it to me." Tang Mansion. Tang Ning looked at the commoner woman, handed over a glass of water, and said, "Miss Lianer, please tell me slowly. Why did you go to the Criminal Department Yamen? What happened?" The woman in cloth and jade skirt sobbed twice and choked up, "That day they broke into my house and wanted to be frivolous to me. I refused to fight to the death. My father fought with them, so they beat him severely and set him on fire. They destroyed our house, and father was burned alive by them." After hearing what she said, even Zhongyi and Su Ryu showed angry expressions on their faces. Tang Yaoyao slapped the table and said angrily, "How unreasonable, killing people to pay for their lives, didn't you report them to the official? The woman lowered her head, wiped her tears, and said, the government arrested them, but later let them go, saying we accidentally caught fire. Dog officials, their officials must be protecting each other and taking human life seriously. Tang Yao Yao gritted his teeth angrily and asked, which government office? The woman whispered, Xingbu. Tang Yao Yao suddenly turned her head and looked at Tang Ning. As a temporary worker, Tang Ning felt very innocent. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 320. I have never seen this case in the criminal department. Tang Ning still explained in front of them to eliminate the suspicion of being a dog official. It seemed that this case was included in the cases that the Ministry of Punishment had filed from the county government. Tang Yao Yao looked at Zhong Yi and asked, can Uncle Zhong take them back to the county government? Zhao Man, who was sitting next to her, shook his head and explained, the Ministry of Punishment can take the case away from the county government, but it cannot do the opposite, unless the Ministry of Punishment brings the case back. But since someone in the Ministry of Punishment has tampered with it, it is impossible to fight it again. Came back. Tang Yao Yao looked at Tang Ning and said, then let the criminal department investigate again. Zhao Man looked at her, then looked at Tang Ning, and said, he is the head of the criminal department. Above him, there are the vice minister and the secretary. Since he has never seen this case, how can he investigate it? She looked at Tang Yao Yao again and said, Miss Lianer just said that it was the Marquis of Yanping and Marquis of Changxing who set the fire. These people are loyal to Brother Kong. For the sake of Brother Kong, the Minister of Punishment must not. He is just the head of the Ministry of Punishment. Can he fight against the Minister of Punishment? Can he fight against the Marquis of Yanping, Changxi Marquis and others? Zhao Man was right. Tang Ning was just a temporary worker in the Ministry of Justice, but the Vice Minister of the Ministry of Justice was different. He had been running the Ministry of Justice for many years and could be said to have the power to rule the world. As long as he was in the Ministry of Justice, whatever he did would be controlled by him. What's more, this case seems to be just an ordinary case, but it involves several dignitaries in the capital and Prince Kong. If he is not careful, he will attract powerful enemies for his family. No matter how much Tang Ning sympathizes with Lianer, she will also. It is impossible to risk the whole family regardless of the situation. But if he really turns a blind eye to this, his own conscience cannot live with it. Even if his own conscience is passable, what will Xiao Ru Ziao think of him, how Qing will think of him, how Tang Yaoying will think of him, Su Hu and Xiao Tao, how would Xiao Qing, Xiao Tao's adopted child, think of him? I'm afraid that the majestic image he has had in their hearts for a long time will suddenly collapse, which is naturally something Tang Ning will not allow to happen. He thought for a while, looked at Miss Lianer, and said, don't worry, I will find a solution for this matter. Zhong Yi looked at her and said, Miss Lianer, you can live here first. No. Tang Ning shook her head and said, they can't live here. Miss Lianer and her mother were arranged to stay at Tang Yao Yao's inn. Tang Ning sat in the pavilion outside the courtyard, skewering a steamed bun with chopsticks and roasting it until browned on the fire. Zhao Man walked in from the outside and sat opposite him. A trace of worry appeared on his face and asked, have you thought about it? You want to go against Yanping Ho and the others, and against Brother Kong Wang. It's hard for you to stand with them together. Tang Ning turned the bun over and said, I don't stand with them. Zhao Man was startled and asked, aren't you and Brother Kong Wang? Tang Ning shook her head, I don't like King Kong. Why? Do you need a reason to dislike someone? Sometimes people are attracted to each other by feeling. Feelings don't need reasons. Prince Kang's mediocrity, stinginess, suspicion, and wanting to marry Miss Li are not the reasons why Tang Ning doesn't like him. Tang Ning doesn't like him mainly because I feel bad about him. Zhao Man looked at him and said seriously, you are already incompatible with the Tang family and brother Duan Wang. If you stand opposite brother Kang, no matter which one of them becomes the prince in the end, there will be no room for you in the capital land. Tang Ning thought for a while and asked, what if none of them can succeed? I know you are a good person. Zhao Man looked at him and was silent for a while before asking, but why did you put the whole family in danger for the sake of Lianer? For Justice. Tang Ning looked at her with an equally serious expression. You. Zhao Man looked at him with an angry and anxious expression. Don't worry, I'm not that stupid. Tang Ning put down the bun, pulled her face, and said, be happy, I haven't seen you smile in a long time. Zhao Man opened his hand and said dissatisfied, you are so brave. The princess's face didn't feel better than other people's faces. Tang Ning picked up the steamed buns he had baked and asked, I'm going fishing later, will you go? Go, I've never fished before. Prince Kang's mansion. In recent months, King Kang's current situation can no longer be described as triumphant. King Duan was detained in the palace for 3 months. There was no longer any force in the court to oppose him. The number of officials secretly seeking refuge increased sharply every day. The various attitudes displayed by His Majesty all demonstrated his status in His Majesty's heart. It has surpassed King Duan. In Prince Kang's mansion, there was singing and dancing. Prince Kang was sitting above him. After a few glasses of wine, his eyes were already a little blurred. A figure stepped forward, handed over an envelope, and said, Your Highness, there is a letter here from Mr. Su, the Minister of Justice. King Kong lay on the soft couch and asked, what is written in the letter? The man opened the envelope, looked at it, and said, the letter said that the descendants of the 4 families of Yanping Marquis, Changxing Marquis, Yongchuan Bo, and Huaning Bo violated the law and caused a life case. The Ministry of Punishment has dismissed the case. The county government brought it up, and Mr. Su wrote to ask His Highness how to handle this case. The man took the letter and said with a smile, Your Highness, Mr. Su sent this letter to show that he cares about His Highness's opinion. We have solicited him several times before, but he rejected them all. We didn't expect that he would do it this time. Take the initiative to say hello to us. The person standing next to King Kong smiled and said, he is just a minister of the Ministry of Justice. With His Highness's current prestige, if he is still the same as before, he will be too ungrateful. The man put the letter away and asked, Your Highness, how should we respond to Minister Su? King Kong glanced at him and said, let him figure it out. Su Mansion. Su Cheng took a sip of tea in the study, and an old man walked in from the outside and said, Sir, there is a reply from Prince Kong. Su Cheng put down his teacup and asked, what did King Kong say? The old man hesitated for a moment and said, King Kong said that I would let the adults decide. He thought for a while and then asked, the matter entrusted to you by the Marquis of Yanping has been settled, why do you still need to ask King Kong for instructions? Su Cheng glanced at him and said, what does Marquis Yanping mean? If King Kong doesn't know about it, wouldn't this risk be in vain? My lord is wise. The old man cupped his hand and said, has your lord already predicted that King Kong will eventually take over the East Palace and ascend to the position of Crown Prince? Who is sure about things that only His Majesty can decide? Su Cheng picked up the teacup again and said, however, in recent days, His Majesty has been very complimentary to King Kong. It seems that he does not often balance the differences between King Kong and King Duan like in the past. From this point of view, King Kang's strength may be greater. Tang family, at the dinner party. At the dinner parties of the Tang family, some important family matters are often discussed, and the atmosphere is more serious. In recent days, it has become more serious than ever. King Duan gradually lost power. Although his power in the court was not greatly lost, it never increased. On the other hand, King Kang's love for the saints has become stronger in recent days, and many wait-and-see factions in the court have gradually moved towards King Kang's camp. The gap between King Duan and him is constantly widening. This marriage between Chen and Chu was originally a good opportunity, but what I didn't expect was that His Majesty actually gave this opportunity directly to King Kang. This undoubtedly further fueled King Kang's arrogance and also made King Duan's influence in the court reputation has dropped to freezing point. This also made the atmosphere of today's dinner extremely depressing. The younger members of the Tang family held their breaths and did not even dare to make too much noise while eating. At a certain moment, the sound of rapid footsteps came from outside. A servant of the Tang family ran in and said in a panic, "Master, someone from Ping'an County government has invited the second young master to go to the county government to inquire about the case." Bah! The chopsticks in Tang Zhao's hand fell to the ground, with a look of astonishment on his face. Tang Qi looked at him, slammed his chopsticks on the table, and said angrily, "What trouble did you get into again?" Tang Zhao looked puzzled and said, "No, I haven't left home in the past 2 days." "You still don't admit it?" Tang Qi stood up and said loudly, "If you haven't done anything, why is it only passed on to you and not to others?" "What am I?" Tang Qi glared at him and said, "What on earth did you do? Tell me." Tang Zhao looked aggrieved, "I really didn't do anything." Tang Hui, who was at the front, looked at him and said, "Since nothing has been done, let's go to Ping'an County office and see what they are doing." After Tang Zhao left in shock, Tang Qi looked at Tang Hui and said, "During this period, no more mistakes can be made. I will ground him for a few months to prevent him from always causing trouble outside." Before finishing the meal, Tang Zhao walked in from the outside again with a gloomy look on his face. Tang Qi glanced at him and asked, "What's going on?" "I just said it wasn't me." Tang Zhao said with a gloomy look on his face, "Those detectives made a mistake. The Ping'an County government was looking for Chen Zhao, the son of Marquis Yanping. Is it so easy for Chen and Tang to make a mistake?" Tang Qi raised his eyebrows and asked, "What happened to Marquis Yanping's son?" Tang Zhao sat down again in his seat and said, "It seems that Chen Zhao committed some murder case. Chen Zhao is Chen Zhao, and I am me. This can be mistaken. I don't know how they did it." Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 321. Tang Zhao picked up his chopsticks again, looked at the leftovers on the table, and cursed the Yanping Marquis mansion and Ping'an County government in his heart. He is already a very useless kid. He is told by his own father every day not to cause trouble, and he just ignores it. There is always an illusion that he wants to just shut himself up at home. The Tang family was so glorious in the past, but now even a small catcher from the county government can bully them. The gap is so huge that he still finds it difficult to accept it. He took a bite of the leftover food, and before he could put it in his mouth, he noticed something was wrong with the atmosphere at the table. His father just looked at him, even his uncle's eyes were on him. His hand holding the food shook involuntarily, and the last bite of leftover food fell on the table. Tang Qi looked at Tang Zhao and asked, "You just said, what happened to Marquis Yanping's son?" "Okay, it seems they set fire to kill people." Both his father and uncle looked at each other a little wrong. Tang Zhao put down his chopsticks and said anxiously, "It's really none of my business. The Marquis of Yanping, the Marquis of Changxing, the Yongchuanbo, and the Huaningbo are all Prince Kong. I don't usually have any contact with their juniors, so it's not me who did it." Tang Qi frowned and asked, "What's the matter with Marquis Changxing and the others?" Tang Zhao swallowed his saliva and said, listen to what those detectives said. Chen Zhao and Li Ping robbed civilian girls, and set fire to kill them when they encountered resistance. I was in the brothel that day, and the madam and Xiang girl can all testify. Dad, uncle, you believe me. I didn't say it was you. Tang Chi and Tang Hui looked at each other and said, you can continue eating. Tang Zhao lowered his head, looked at the few remaining pieces of soup on the table, picked up a bone with a trace of it, and bit it into pieces with a click. In the study room, Tang Hui stood in front of the desk and suddenly asked, what do you think? How could Ping An County government make such an omission? They did it on purpose. Tang Chi frowned and said, but I can't figure out the reason why they did this. That little fox is so cunning and has helped King Kong many times. Without him, there would be nothing. The consequences of King Kong and King Duan today are all caused by him alone. I can't see clearly what he is doing today. Tang Hui said, he wants to borrow the sword. Lend me the Tang family's sword to weaken King Kong. Tang Chi's face became even more suspicious. He has borrowed King Kang's sword many times to bring King Duan to the current situation. This time he wants to borrow our sword to deal with King Kong. What exactly do you want to do? Could it be that what he really supports is King Hui? Tang Hui seemed to sigh and said, tell me, should we borrow this knife or not? Tang Chi lowered his head and fell into a brief silence. Now that King Kang's influence in the court has reached its peak, if he takes one more step forward, he will take the position of the East Palace. What will be left for King Duan and the Tang family will be an abyss. In the matter of party strife, one step will break the bones. If King Kong comes to power, King Duan will inevitably die, and the Tang family will naturally have no good results. Similarly, if King Duan comes to power, King Kong will undoubtedly die, and the powerful people after him will also be liquidated. They had no choice, and it was impossible to choose. This was not a borrowed knife, but a knife handed to them. All the Tang family could do was hold the knife and stab it forward. Tang Chi pondered for a moment, then lowered his head and said, I will have someone investigate Marquis Yanping's matter immediately. After the Yuan dynasty, it was considered to be in, but during these cold days, the temperature not only did not get warmer, but was actually colder than the previous days. I'm hooked, I'm hooked. The cold wind blowing by the stream made Zhao Man's face turn red, but she didn't care at all. She suddenly lifted the fishing rod, and a small fish the size of a palm was caught by her. This season is actually not suitable for fishing, and the period after the release of the yamen is not a good time for fishing. However, in a short time, Zhao Man has caught 3 fish. Although they are all small fish the size of a palm, they are enough to make her happy. Dancing. The luck of the beautiful girl certainly played a small part in the reason, but the main reason was that Tang Ning had arranged for Lu Lao to surround the small pool with stones before going to the yamen, and put dozens of them in the pool after they had been hungry for a long time. Small fish. She put the small fish in a small clay pot filled with water, looked at Tang Ning, and said proudly, I'm pretty good. Tang Ning cooperated with her and said, it's my first time to catch so many fish. It's amazing. Zhao Man picked up the fishing rod again, sat back on the small bench, and murmured, there are so many interesting things in this world. I should move out of the palace as soon as possible. In her eyes, even fishing is interesting, so there are too many interesting things in this world for her. However, she was finally not as dull as before, so Tang Ning felt that it was worthwhile to accompany her out to enjoy the cold breeze on such a cold day. He looked up at the sky and said, Princess, it's getting late. Let's go back. Zhao Man looked at him, held the fishing rod tightly, and said, wait a while, I'll catch another one and then go home. Maybe she had run out of luck before, but after half an hour, she didn't catch another fish. She poured all the small fish in the clay pot into the stream and said, go home quickly. Don't be so greedy in the future. Tang Ning took her fishing rod and helped her reel in the line, only to realize that there was no bait on her hook. Tang Ning glanced at her. Zhao Man's eyes were a little dodgeful. He put away the fishing rod and said, let's go. It would take some time for the carriage to drive from outside the city into the city. Zhao Man sat in the carriage and Tang Ning sat outside, leaning against the carriage and looking at the stars in the sky. There was movement in the carriage. Zhao Man got out of the carriage, leaned on the other side, looked up at the night sky like him, and said, "My mother told me when I was a child that every star in the sky represents a person's life. Every star in the sky represents a person's life. When life comes to an end, a star falls. The stars in the sky represent all living beings in the world, who live together and die as stars fall. This is a very romantic thing." Tang Ning couldn't bear to tell her that the stars in the sky were just light from hundreds of millions of years ago. She thought the stars may have disappeared into the vast universe. "Which star is my star?" She hugged her knees and looked at the night sky, murmuring. Tang Ning turned her head and took a look. The bright moonlight cast a layer of holy light on the side of her face. Zhao Man suddenly turned to look at him and said, "It would be great if I had known you earlier." Tang Ning retracted her thoughts and asked what. A different smile appeared on her face. She waved her hand and said softly, "It's nothing." Tang family. It was late at night, but there was still light in Tang Huai's study. "I asked someone to ask Chief Su. Su Cheng, the Minister of Criminal Affairs, inexplicably submitted all the serious case files of Ping'an County Yamen yesterday, and there was no follow-up after that." Tang Chi paced in the study and said, "These cases did not go to the Ministry of Punishment, but were temporarily detained by Su Cheng. The case at the Yanping Marquis Mansion was also among them. Su Cheng's purpose should be only this: this is a case in which people are involved in this case in order to deceive others." Su Cheng. Tang Huai tapped his index finger on the table and said, "This person showed favor to King Duan half a year ago, but now he has turned to King Kong." Tang Chi nodded and said, "Even if it's not completely reversed, it should be almost there. There are many officials like Su Cheng in the court. They do not have a firm camp and will fall wherever the wind blows. They act very measuredly. They only sell benefits and do not offend the other party too much. No matter who gains power in the future, even if they will not be reused, they will not end up miserable." He was silent for a moment and said, "This case alone is not enough. Yanping Hao and others are just chess pieces. Even if they are removed, it will not be of much benefit to us. Our target is the chess player." Tang Huai thought for a while and said, "It is useless to move 1 or 2 chess pieces, but if you move 10 or 8 pieces at a time, the chess player can still sit still.